Hello everyone, so as you can see today we're going to be doing a little bit of kit bashing, and I have two miniatures in the background already prepped. So first off we're going to be doing some Trench Pilgrims, which are a cross between the official minis and plastic kits to give us a broad spectrum of miniatures that all broadly blend together but do have individuality. So let's start with the Trench Pilgrims. So we can see here that I have an official Trench Pilgrim, but I've changed the head. The head is from the Flagellants kit from Games Workshop. The whip is also from the Flagellants kit from Games Workshop, and this gun is from the Winter Germans from Bolt Action. So why have I kit bashed my Pilgrim with no iron capirote? Well, my Trench Pilgrims are in fact the Procession of Sacred Affliction and shun the use of the iron capirote, so I will not be using it in these conversions, but what that also means is that we can have some nice individuality amongst them. So I'm going to put him back there and let's see how I did it. So first off we're going to go with one of our official minis, and then we're going to get him a head. So the heads we are going to be using, as I said, are going to be from the Flagellants kit. We have a couple of different options. We can have a bearded head with its eyes barred, sort of mirroring the iron capirote feel, but also giving me the aesthetic of Trench Pilgrims without them. Or we can go with this face with the bandaged eyes, but I think we're going to go with this head with its mouth sealed. So I'm just going to clip that off. Give me 1 second. Now, I don't mind that there is this little piece on the top, and why don't I mind that? If I put up the artwork for the Procession of Sacred Affliction up in the top right hand corner, as you can see there, they have head wraps. So how are we going to do that? I'm using a little bit of super glue. This is Colourforge thin super glue. That came out a bit fast there. I'll link all the kits that I'm using for this in the description below, and all the materials I use as well. Please, if you are considering following along, please try to use some of those affiliate links I have to get a bit of a discount on your hobby supplies and also support the channel. And there we are, we have our Pilgrim with his head glued. Now I don't mind about that bit of sprue up on the top there, because now I'm going to go with some Tamiya tape. Now what I've done is I've got this Tamiya masking tape, this thin masking tape, and I've just cut it in half so they have a nice thin strip. And then all I'm going to do with my miniature is go from the bottom of the face hook that around and give him that head wrapping we can see in the official artwork. I do want to make this a bit more rounded, so I'm going to do that again with another piece. And I'll leave him to dry a moment or two, then we'll get that head wrap finished. While he is drying, I need to select him some weapons, so I think I'm going to go for the whip Flagellants have, and luckily we have one here. So the Old World Flagellants kit is a very nice kit to use for our Trench Pilgrim miniatures. Now when we move on to the Yeomans, we're going to be using the kit that I'm using next for his gun, and that is the German Winter Soldiers or Winter Infantry from Bolt Action. So we have our whip here. Let's attach the whip arm as though he's about to whip someone, just like the other guy. So a little bit of our glue. There we are. Slight blob. I'm just going to leave that on its side. There's not very much glue left in this, so I can just leave it a little bit tilted. Please don't do that with a full glue, and especially not thin glue. You will glue everything on the table to everything else. The only reason I am doing it is because I know how much glue is left. There's very, very little. But anyway, enough about glue. So now we need to select him a gun. And to do that, I'm going to move over to our sprue of Winter Germans. And you can see the Winter Germans' bodies there are going to be perfect for our new Antioch Yeoman. So let's have a look for a gun for him. I think this one here would be quite fitting. So I will get my clippers, snip that off, and we'll get attaching that on. So just make sure you clean off those little bits of sprue, and the way I do it is I just use the edge of my clippers, just give it a scrape and clean that off. And now we'll go back to our mini, we'll go back to our bit of glue, dab a tiny bit in there, and attach the arm onto him there. There we are. That is our Procession of the Sacred Affliction mini done. I'm just going to add some glue to his base, and then we'll correct that head soon. So generous dollop of glue on the base, get him cemented down. So now, how about our yeoman? Now I could just snip off the heads for the Winter Germans, the bodies for the Winter Germans, and a gun, and be done with it. But I don't want to do that, because I don't want them to look too like bolt action minis, but I do want them to fit into Trench Crusade, and obviously they're going to need to look like they're doing a bit of trench warfare. So let's have a look at what we can equip them with. Now, I think I'm going to go with this body here. So let's clip that off. And let's get to making something a little bit interesting. Now, if I don't want to use the bolt action heads, which heads am I going to use? Well, I'm actually going to bring them into the Trench Crusade verse by attaching a knight helmet from Puppets War. These are the Puppets War Templar helmets. And I'll give you a good view of that in a second once I've glued it on. And they are very nice for adapting things into Trench Crusade because they give you that knightly aesthetic, and when you combine them with bolt action minis, that gives you the World War I feel and World War II feel that often many of these miniatures have. So let's just attach that head. While it is drying, just get a good look at him. So you will notice that if I get an official miniature for Trench Crusade and just put it next to this yeoman, they are a little bit bigger, but don't worry about it. If you put them onto built-up bases, they will match. And also, there isn't a great deal of size between them. Oops, sorry, I've just realised I'm slightly off screen there. There we go, there isn't a great deal of size between them. I'll show you that Kneeling Pilgrim again. For some reason this Kneeling Pilgrim is massive. It's probably because of the Gabirote. But yeah, there isn't a great deal of size difference between them, so don't necessarily need to worry about that either. And let's get him on his base. Once he's on his base, we'll go back to that Pilgrim and sort out his head wrappings, finalise those. Then once those head wrappings are dry, we can come back to this yeoman who will be dry on his base. So I've added a little bit of glue to my base, trying to knock his head off. And I attach my yeoman there. The other nice thing about these is that if they are dropped, because we are using plastic miniatures, they will survive the fall a little better, which is quite nice for when you need hordes of chaff infantry. You're not worrying about delicate resin snapping. It is going to take a little while to set because I am setting a single foot. So I'm going to be back when he's dry. So there we are. His leg is drying. I'm just going to set him down to one side. And we move back to this guy now. So what you might find is that these wrappings need a little bit of gluing down. So we're going to do that next. I'm just going to drop a bit of super glue. Then, very important, this step, that you don't glue yourself to the miniature. Just push it all into place. Manipulate and move it around a little bit with a cocktail stick. Where wrappings may be sticking up a little bit that you don't want it to, just push it down. Just wrap the back of the head there. So give me 1 second to do that. Just going to take that over there. Push that into place. Seal it all down. Now you'll notice on the artworks for these, they can't actually see. There are no eye holes in their wrappings. Whether that's a design choice, I don't know, but I'm choosing to go with that for my own. Now, once that's dry, you just trim all the bits that aren't attached into the mini off. Like that tail there. You could leave it on if you like. Seal up all your gaps with a bit of super glue. And then trim that all down. And you'd have a pretty good head wrap. I won't trim it down now because I want to move on to the next mini, but we may come back at the end of the video to see that trim down and how he looks. So we'll leave him to one side and we'll move back to our yeoman. So our yeoman is going to need a gun, and we go back to our winter infantry sprue. Now I think he's going to have, for me, an automatic rifle. So I'm going to use this AK looking rifle down here. I'll just class it as an automatic rifle or a semi-automatic rifle as opposed to a machine gun, because I want to save on the ducat cost for these guys, but I also want to make use of those fire team rules. And you know, yeomen are a very cheap and effective way of getting a really good fire team on the tabletop. So let's clip that off and stick it to our mini. Now, because we are going on to the Winter German kit itself, the Winter German body, we can position this arm a little better. So clean off the bits of sprue if you need to, by just giving them a quick scrape with your pliers. Let's get to building our yeoman. There we are, a little bit of super glue on there. Yeoman arm goes on. But that yeoman now, he's missing an arm, so we need to choose him a close combat weapon, and for that we will be going back to our Flagellants kit. I think a nice trench club is going to really do the job and make him nice and cheap for me to field, as that semi-automatic rifle is going to be a little bit costly on ducats. So let's get that clipped off and glued on. Just a quick test, and you'll also see that he has now lost a sleeve on his jacket. I think that's quite fitting for Trench Crusade, that even the new Antioch guys are probably going to have damaged equipment, probably not going to be feeling the greatest, probably not going to be taking care of their equipment too much. You know, obviously new Antioch are better drilled than most other things, but I feel like he fits quite nicely into the Trench Crusade verse. He's running, he's shooting a guy, and then he's going to run in with his club and absolutely stove his head in. So I'm going to leave him down there to dry, and you'll notice this guy in the background, he is a full bolt action mini, but he has the head of a stormtrooper. That's a stormtrooper helmet there, and he fits in quite nicely. Looks very, very like the normal yeoman artwork, but again, if I drop him, he's a bit more sturdy. Obviously I didn't drop him from a great height there. but he will be a little more durable if he's dropped, and as I said earlier, that's perfect for chaff. That's the sort of thing we need. We tend to take more care of larger models anyway. And speaking of larger models, you probably saw in the video description that I mentioned I'm going to make some machine infantry, but they haven't as of yet appeared in this video. Curious, so let's introduce one. So my idea for these was that the shrine anchorites were thought to be lost by the church when the monastery that they were made from was destroyed. For a small amount of time, the princes of the church didn't know that Brother Akakios was making his way to Mount Athos, so they were worried about the shrine anchorite designs. But in secret, they had been working on the heavy mechanized infantry. But they are based on the anchorite design, so it stands to reason that at some point an anchorite looked like a machine infantry, and a machine infantry may have looked a little like an anchorite. So how have I made this? This is the body of a standard machine infantry that has been cut in half, and a shrine anchorite that has been shrunk down to 75% scale. So what I've done is I've prepped a few minis for this section a bit ahead of schedule, and I have gone and got my 75% scale body, engine pack and head of my shrine anchorite and glued them together, and then with a Dremel I have saw the legs off of my machine heavy infantry to give me the legs. Obviously the smaller machine heavy infantry probably wouldn't have the mechanized legs of the shrine anchorite. They would have something more like the standard normal designs that we'd see. It would also make a bit more sense as the person's legs have to be there. Unless you make a communicant, because I made my communicant almost entirely out of the kit for the shrine anchorite, but with a body of the machine heavy infantry, the head of a Trench Pilgrim's communicant, a flamethrower because that auto hits and ignores the penalties that communicants get for ranged weapons, and a tank hammer because why not let him just ignore all the armor and kill everyone? Anyway, I'll put him away and let's look at how we're going to build my castigator for my Trench Pilgrims. And the first thing is first, we're going to need to attach the body to the legs. But to do that, I'm going to attach it to the base first, and that's just going to give me a bit of a handle to use when I'm gluing. So, not necessary on the smaller models, but I think with something as big as this, or something a bit bigger, you want that bit more of help when you're manoeuvring around it, so you don't glue yourself to something as large as a machine heavy infantry. So I'm just going to reinforce that to glue a little bit with a bit more glue. Then I'm going to add glue onto the body here. Now you'll notice that my Dremel tool didn't saw it in half quite as accurately as I would have liked. It's quite jagged. Doesn't really matter for the purpose of this because I'm going to use some chain in a moment to strap up the waist and make a belt. There we are. I'm just going to pop the machine heavy infantry legs onto my anchorite body, and I'm probably going to have to wait here a little while holding it as they aren't a snug fit. So when you are sawing in half your own heavy mechanized infantry, please make sure if you're using a Dremel to either do it outside where there is all the ventilation you could ask for, or if you're doing it inside, open the windows, give yourself ventilation and mask up with a dust mask. You do not want to be breathing in resin dust. The other thing I would suggest is if you don't want to use a Dremel or you don't have a Dremel, don't go with clippers. If you absolutely have to use clippers, score the area first and then nip small bits at a time. Don't try and cut it directly in half with the clippers as it will shatter. But the best option is probably use a hobby saw. I didn't have one for this. I thought the Dremel would do the trick. It did, but it left it a bit weird because my Dremel couldn't get all the way through. It's only a small Dremel tool. So I'm going to hold this and I'm going to be back when it's dry and we can move on to the next bit. So here we have the body attached and the miniature is starting to dry now. And what I'm going to do to help hide this crack in the armour but also reinforce that join line is add a little bit of glue onto the front here. Then I'm going to lay some 2mm chain across it and just give it a wrap around the body a couple of times. So all I'm doing here is just going to wrap the body with that chain, create that nice chain belt. I like the idea of these having chain belts on them because it feels to me like they would probably have some sort of penitent chains knocking around. You can also have it just in interesting ways around the body, but I also think just adds a nice bit of visual interest to the minis. Clip that off when you've got a nice level of it. Find the end of the chain, drop some glue on. Find the other end of the chain that's floating free, drop a bit of glue on, drop a bit of glue through the whole of the chain at various different points. Give the mini a bit of a stronger midsection, stronger bond to the midsection there. But as I said, he's my castigator, so he's going to need some decorations. And once again, we'll turn to the Flagellants kit. A few bits of rope and a couple of these trinkets, so maybe this key here, this rope here, this egg timer, this hourglass, I don't know why I said egg timer, and maybe this skull and a rope. So I'm just going to clip those off and we'll stick them on the mini and move on to the next bit. So you might be wondering, what can I actually class this as on the table? Now, if you make it in a new Antioch build and you just want a sort of Mark 1 armour for maybe Papal States Intervention Force, you could just run it as standard machine armour. But in my Trench Pilgrims, I'm actually going to run this as a castigator, and that castigator is going to be in reinforced armour, and because he is of the procession of Sacred Affliction, that reinforced armour is also going to have a holy icon shield. Now, how do we attach that holy icon shield and what are we going to use for it? Well, for my holy icon shield, I'm just going to use a big old ballistic shield because I think that's just going to look really cool with a bit of freehanding on it. Now, if you are a channel member, you have a couple of options of what you would like me to freehand on this when I've unglued my finger from this piece of rope. Please do not glue yourself to the miniatures, as that is a mistake. That sounded like a PSA then. Anyway, yeah, don't glue yourself to miniatures, because especially if you do it on camera, because you'll make yourself look stupid. Anyway, arm, stick the arm on. That's what we're doing next. And that's going to take a little while to dry, so I'll be back when it does. And there we are, that is the arm glued. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that obviously these are indented and the arms have a flat attachment point. So we're going to need to adapt the arms very slightly, and I'll show you how I did that on this next arm now. So here we have our other arm, and all I'm going to do is snip in there. Now be careful, because if you go with too much force you could shatter a piece off. Just clip little bits at a time and just shave it down a tiny bit. You can see resin pinging everywhere there. That's going to be a bit naff to clean up later. Anyway, apply glue to the arm, not to the machine armour, because everywhere that the arm touches will glue, but not everywhere that the machine armour. So the machine armour may not get every attachment point and may not glue properly. There we are. You might notice as well the resin colours are different. That's just because I had a few printed in cream resin and a few printed in grey resin, and I kit bashed between them all. So the resins mismatch a little, but there's no other reason than that. Then I'm going to go around my mini and attach all these little trinkets that I mentioned earlier on. So the hourglass and the key. So find a couple of spots where you can hang those. I think they're just going to go on the front of the miniature. Find a spot, tuck them in. The nice thing about the chains is that they will adhere to those chains quite nicely. You can even hook them directly onto the chains in a sense. Give yourself a nice little attachment point, and because that hourglass is on a chain, it will look like it's coming from that chain wrap. And I think I'll put the key around the back here, and the same thing goes for the key. So I'm going to use the key to cover up this little gap here. I'm going to find a place where I want it to hang from, which is about there. Apply a bit of glue to the place I'm going to hang it from, not to the key. You see the chains moving a tiny bit there, so this bit of glue will help to hold them down too. I am running out of glue now, so going to have to be careful how I glue things together. There we are, that's a bit of glue there. Attach the key coming off the back there. That may need a bit more glue later on to help it settle, but let's move on to the hand. Now the hand, I'm going to go with what I'm calling the anti-tank mace. Now to make it an anti-tank mace, I need it to be a bit bomby, and to do that I'm going to go back to those winter Germans, and I'm going to pick up their rocket propelled grenades from the sprue. So we're just going to find one of those RPGs. This one at the bottom here on its own looks like a very good candidate, and we're going to clip the top grenade off. There we are. So we get the very tip of that RPG, get just the grenade, clip off the top of the mace. Then I want to glue that onto there, so I'll get a tiny bit of glue, and that's going to make our anti-tank mace. So there we go, my tiny bit of glue added, and there we go. Oh dear, that's fallen over. There we go, so now that is our anti-tank mace. Now you might notice that the wrist for the machine armour and the wrist for the anchorite hand is a little different in size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip off the hand just there and have that attached to a thicker point. So just make sure before you do this, the arm is a bit more secure. Then you want to clip just above where the hand normally attaches on the armour. This will ping everywhere, so you need to be prepared for that. You might need to wear safety glasses when you're clipping resin. I'm definitely going to need to wear some if I do this in the future. I was afraid the arm might fall off. That's alright though, it's still got some glue drying on it. I didn't leave it long enough to set. Can add that back on. Oops. Well, I can add that back on when it wants to cooperate, and fair enough. I have just clipped its a piece of it off, so I can see why it may not want to. So with that arm now glued on, if you need to clean this up, just clean this up with a bit of trimming. But I seem to have got a nice even surface on there, barring maybe a tiny bit I might have to clip off. But we're going to go to our anti-tank mace. We're going to add glue to the anchorite hand. And then from there, I may need to hold this in place for a little while. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be back when that's set. And there we have our castigator in his reinforced armour and holy icon shield with anti-tank hammer. He can be given the keyword strong so he can carry that, and for his ranged weapon I think I'm going to give him an SMG. And the SMG I'm going to use for that is actually just going to be this little AK down here. Not technically an SMG, but I like the aesthetic of it, and I think it would fit him better than a small SMG from Bolt Action, or even the SMG from the Trench Pilgrims kit, because he's a fair bit bigger than a normal castigator. Now, some of you may realise I put that castigator on a base a bit too large. All I need to do is just separate him from the base and put him onto a 32mm as opposed to the 40 that he is on here. The 40 that he is on here would mean that you can run him as a machine armour in your new Antioch forces, and you just swap out this weapon here, or perhaps class it as just a mace. But for me, he's going to be a Trench Pilgrim. Everything's dry. I'll just pop him off the base, stick him on the 32mm, sorry. I don't know why I was saying 28mm there. And then we're good to go. So here we have our Yeoman of New Antioch, our Trench Pilgrim, our Procession of the Sacred Affliction Trench Pilgrim, and another Yeoman. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all found this useful. If any of you follow along, please let me know in the comments below. And I have another announcement to make for the channel. I am at Lead and Steel next week in Sheffield, so if you see me, come and say hello, and remember to ask me what year it is, because you may get a nice surprise. Anyway, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for following along. Please like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and share your favourite video with a friend. I will leave 2 links up on screen right now. One will direct you to the lore of the Trench Pilgrims, and the other will direct you to the lore of New Antioch. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all soon.